In this video, we will show you how to deploy school data sync using SDS format CSV files. In order to deploy SDS successfully, you must have an Office 365 for Education tenant, a global administrator account, and a School Data Sync Plan 1 service enabled within your license. If you meet these prerequisites, you are ready to deploy SDS. To begin deploying SDS, open a private session from a modern browser and navigate to sds.microsoft.com. Once the page loads, select Sign In. When prompted, enter your Global Administrator credentials. If this is your first time logging into SDS, you'll be greeted with a settings page, which will allow you to enable or disable SDS. You will want to ensure you toggle the switch to the On position to enable SDS. Once you've completed this, or if SDS was already enabled, click the Add Profile button to begin the SDS setup wizard. To begin the SDS setup, you first need to specify a name for your sync profile. A sync profile is just a collection of settings and configurations that define how and what SDS will synchronize to your Office tenant. Once you have named your sync profile, pick the connection method SDS will use to sync your school's data. If syncing using CSV files, choose the Upload CSV files shown. Next, choose the format of the CSV files you're uploading. If you are syncing CSV files in the SDS format, choose CSV files SDS format. Once you have made your selection, click Start. When on the Sync Options page, decide whether you'll be syncing new or existing users. If new users, SDS will create user accounts for each teacher and student within your CSV dataset if syncing. With existing users, SDS will add extension attributes on top of the already existing user objects within your tenant for each of the students and teachers within your CSV dataset. For this video, we will be selecting the Existing Users option since we already have users created in our Office tenant. Once you've selected the appropriate option, it's time to upload your CSV files. Select the Upload Files, Add Files, and select your 6 SDS format CSV files. Select Open. Once all are shown, select Upload. SDS will need to complete a short validation process when the files are uploaded to look for formatting issues and errors within the files. If no errors are generated, click OK. In the Select School and Section Properties menu, choose the attributes you plan to synchronize. Your selections should mirror the attributes contained within your CSV files. Next, you'll have the option to create a team automatically from each object in the sections.csv file. Without this option, SDS will only create the underlying M365 group. Next, you have the option to allow SDS to replace invalid special characters inline during the sync process. As special characters are encountered, SDS will replace them with an underscore. Next, you have the option to control the section display named. SDS will always write the display name during the first time sync. When it creates the Office group, this option decides if SDS will overwrite the display name for each subsequent sync, or if you want to allow teachers to overwrite and manage the section display name after the first time sync. Next, you have the option to delay processing of student enrollments. This is helpful when you don't want to expose your student rosters in advance of the school start date. Be sure to set a date early enough to allow for processing to complete before you need your students to access the Office groups and class teams. Large data sets can take several days to fully process student enrollments, and small districts may complete within a few hours, so plan accordingly. Once you have made all of your selections, select Next. On the Teacher's Options page, select your identity matching options. This is where you'll tell SDS how to match teachers from your CSV file to users in Office. In the Primary Key Source Directory options, select the attribute you want to use for matching. If you need to add a domain to your source attribute, select the appropriate domain from the drop-down menu. Finally, select the target attribute which you are matching. Your source attribute plus the domain selected should equal this value. If these values match, the identity will sync. If they don't match, you'll see an error for the failed match after your sync completes. Next, select the teacher's properties you plan to sync. You should mirror the attributes that will be included in your CSV files in this menu. Once you've made your selection, click Next. On the Student Options page, choose your identity matching options. Again, this is where you'll tell SDS how to match your students in your CSV file to users in Office 365. In the Primary Key Source Directory option, select the attribute you want to use for matching. If you need to add a domain to your source attribute, select the appropriate domain from the drop-down menu. Finally, select the target attribute which you are matching to your source attribute. Your source attribute plus the domain selected should equal this value. If they don't match, you will see an error for the failed match after your sync completes. Next, select the student properties you plan to sync. You should mirror the attributes that will be included in your CSV file. In this menu, once you've made your selection, click Next. On the Summary page, review the sync profile settings and make sure no changes are needed. Once you're happy with your selections, click the blue Create Profile button. Once submitted, wait for the profile to create. This may take a minute or two. Continue to refresh the page until you see the sync populate with blue icons and show the actual sync status. Once the profile is created, SDS will run through the pre-sync validation check. If errors are encountered, the sync will stop and give the admin a chance to remediate the errors before starting the real sync. Once remediated, you can upload your new CSV files to begin the same process again. If you want to ignore the errors, you can also proceed without remediating. Just click the blue Resume Sync option on the profile to start the real sync. If no errors are encountered during the pre-sync validation process, the real sync will start automatically. Once the sync has started, continue to check back on your sync status. You have now successfully deployed SDS using the SDS format CSV files. Should you have any additional questions, please visit aka.ms/SDS support.